All right, so at this point, we've talked about various ways of animating. We've talked about keyframing different properties like position, scale, rotation, transparency or opacity, whatever you want to call it. Let's talk about other ways that we can kind of work, have animation affect multiple things. Okay. So I want you to sort of understand, let's think about like if I have a bunch of items, I can place them into a folder, like, I was doing something like this, and then I can kind of move this folder as a group, right? And, a lot of programs like Adobe Photoshop or Adobe Illustrator or, they have ways of grouping things, right? Like you can sometimes they're called a folder or a set, or sometimes you can link stuff together so that by moving one, you really move multiple. This prevents us from having to, animate or move multiple things. And After Effects is no different in the sense that you can have layers affect other layers. Okay. The way that they refer to this is referred to as parenting. So in After Effects, you can have layers in your composition, have what I call the parent-child relationship. Okay. The child does whatever the parent does. So if the parent was to move left to right, then all of its children would move left to right. If the parent were to change its opacity or its scale, all of its children would also, change its opacity and its scale. Um, if you were to animate something from the child, though, childs do not affect the parents, only parents affect the children. Okay. So this allows you to have sort of like one major or one main element that you can animate that affect multiple things. Then individuals can have their own animation that doesn't affect the main. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I have fish one, and what I'm going to do is set a position. And I'm just going to animate the fish over 2 seconds going to the right. Hopefully, can I select it? There we go. Okay. So hopefully at this point, you guys should know how this kind of works. So I'm changing the position of fish one to move from, kind of, I would call this kind of top middle left to there. Now, I could, let's say, if, for instance, I wanted the fish to kind of follow this, I could animate that individually, but what we can do here is in our toggles and switch modes area, there's something called parent and link. So what I'm going to do is grab fish two, and I'm going to set this to, I'm going to set the parent of fish two. Okay. And so what I'm going to do is set the parent of fish two to be fish one. So what this means is whatever fish one does, fish two will do because it is the child and this is the parent. So if I play this back, see how fish two also moves exactly in the same pace as fish one. Okay. Another way to do this is rather than using this drop-down menu, you can actually use what's called this pick whip, which is like this little, kind of looks like a little swirl. And what I can do is if I click it, I can actually point it to the layer that I want to be the parent. I'm going to point it to this. So now fish three is also going to follow fish one as such. So I'm going to set all four fishes. And what's nice about this is, let's say that I wanted to change my animation, rather than having to edit four separate layers, since only the first layer is the only one that actually has keyframes attached to it. So for instance, let's say I go here and I'm gonna, I don't know, maybe instead of going to the left, it goes to the right. I only have to change that one set of keyframes and all of the children will automatically update because they just do whatever the parent does. All right. So I was using position, but we could also use scale. I'm going to have this scale, maybe, I don't know, 50% over time. You can see the other ones are doing that as well. Or we can do opacity. So if I were to have this fade out, oops, I lied. Actually, I guess opacity doesn't affect it, but the other ones did. So, so I take that back. Teachers make mistakes too. So it's position, scale, rotation, but not opacity. There are ways of doing opacity for multiple later, but we'll talk about that. But anyway, so here all of the fish are moving. Now they're all being controlled by, this is the main fish, fish one. I'm going to select fish two, and let's just have fish two do a rotation. So I'm having it do one full rotation. Hopefully by this point you guys know how this works. And I'm just going to play it back. And so I want you to notice how it's still following its parent, fish one, but it's still able to do its own animation. So it's able to, rotate, or I can scale it, or, play around with opacity or whatever it is I want it to do. And it won't affect the others because its children do not affect the parent, only parents affect the children. Okay. Once again, I'm going to parent these two circles to circle one. And the idea here is, okay, maybe I'm going to animate circle one. Oops. And maybe while that's happening, I'm going to play around with scale. Let's move that keyframe back here. And we can see how we can get some interesting kind of designs out of that. I don't know exactly what I asked you guys to do for this one. Oh, I think in this one I changed let's change the I'm gonna change. So right now what's happening is he has it scaling from here. I want it to scale from the middle. So actually what I'm gonna do is let's change that anchor point. Oops, not that, but let me do the anchor point first. There we go. And so now when this moves down, it's going to scale from the center rather than from. So even though this is the parent, I've moved the anchor point so it kind of adjusts to all of them. Or I could have made this the parent, either way. All right. So at this point, when we've been making animations or motions, our motion paths have been very linear. So if I have a circle, it moves from point A to point B in a straight line. And even when I had multiple points, it was kind of these linear lines here from point C to point D. What if I actually wanted to have more of like a curved shape? So in other words, I want to have something that goes like that. Okay. So we're going to talk about how to do curves. So let's open up exercise 12. All right. And I'm going to try to match. What did I have you guys do? Sometimes, all right, we're just going to make a, All right, so I have this butterfly here. Currently, it's going from the bottom left to the upper right. And if you highlight the layer, you can literally see the motion path. The motion path is like, the line or the direction that the character is following. And you can literally see that it's a straight line. What we're going to do is make this into a curve, which I have to understand, even if maybe it's a little bit boring, is that a motion path in something like, Adobe After Effects is no different. Oops, what's going on here? Is no different than a vector in something like Figma or, all right, so here, this is a vector line, right? And what I'm actually able to do is take this and pull out Bezier handles. These Bezier handles allow me to take a linear vector line and make it into a curved vector line. And that is actually what we can do here. What I'm going to do is go to this pen tool. The pen tool actually allows you to make vectors within Adobe After Effects, something we're going to talk about a little later. And I'm going to grab the one that says Convert Vertex tool. And what you have to understand if I take this layer one is that these keyframes, which is here and here, they're basically the same as anchor points. Anchor points we've talked about with vectors as being kind of the way it dictates the line. And what I'm going to do is take the Convert Vertex tool and I can make this into a curved path in the same way that I could do this in Figma or Adobe Illustrator. So if you have any experience dealing with vector programs like those, or working with vectors in Photoshop, this might seem kind of familiar to you. Okay, and you can see that now my butterfly is moving on a curved path as opposed to a linear path. The same linear path here. Looks like I accidentally made a keyframe. I'll delete that. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing. These are the two anchor points, or, I say anchor points because that's how it would be referred to in a vector program. In this case, they're keyframes and anchor points. And I'm going to just click on them, and you can see I'm pulling out this bar. We would call this a Bezier handle, and this allows me to dictate the path of my curve. Now you can see that I've gone from a linear line to a curved line. Now, let's say for the sake of argument, oops, this isn't what I wanted. I wanted to go back to a linear line. What you could actually do is, there's two ways to do this. You could take the bar, the Bezier handle, and drag it back into the anchor or the keyframe. That's one way to do it. You can also just literally click once, and that would remove any Bezier handles, which would thus make it from a curved line back or curved path back into a linear or straight line path. Okay. All right. So let's talk about your composition and the length of your layer. So currently, my composition here is set to 15 seconds, right? You can see that. And if I hit play or the space bar, I play this, and all four layers, heart one through two, three, and four, they play the entire time. Um, and the thing about it is, although I might want something like, some sort of image or video in my composition, I maybe don't necessarily want it the entire length. What if I just wanted the heart to last for, I don't know, 1 second or 2 seconds? Now, what you can actually do is every time you have an image, you can actually take the edge, and it might be hard to see here. I don't know if my Zoom will work on recording, but there's this double-ended arrow here. And what I could actually do is drag that in. I'm just going to drag it to about 1 second. This is for heart one. And when I play this, notice this is heart one in the upper left-hand corner. And notice what happens when I hit play after 1 second, it'll disappear. So I have it in my composition, but it only lasts for about 1 second. Okay, I'm going to undo this by doing edit Command Z or Control Z. Boom, tough actin, tenactin. And there's actually a shortcut way of doing this. I'm going to click on 1 second, or I can set the time code here to exactly 1 second. I want to be precise. Keyboard shortcut to do this would be using Option and then the left-facing bracket. So Option, left-facing bracket. Okay. Now I'm going to see how I kind of did that for me. I'm going to go to layer 2. Now you can actually do it from the front as well. So if I take this and drag it from the front, it's the same as, we call this trimming. It's the same as if what I did here at the end. Now I could also trim it like I did in part one. Or if, looks like I'm having a little difficulty. There we go. Dragging this in. So I could try to do something like that. Keyboard shortcut is I can do right facing bracket. So if I did Option right facing bracket, that is what we would call the in mark. And then I'm going to go to 2 seconds and then do the closing of that, which would be Option left facing bracket. And so now I've trimmed these layers. So I can use these to kind of quickly trim my layers so I don't have to do them manually. And I'm going to play this back. And each layer will last for about 1 second. Okay. All right, last thing with regards to After Effects that we'll talk about is I'm going to go to Photoshop. And we've talked about Photoshop and Photo P or raster editor. And I'm going to open up exercise, or I'm going to go to Photoshop. You can also do this in Photo P. I'm going to open up Photoshop document.psd. Okay. And I want you to notice that I have this composition here, and it's really made up of 3 layers. I have this background, I got a dog, and I got a hat. Okay. I also could have done this for Photo P, for those of you who are using Photo P instead of Photoshop. You can see I have the same context of layers there. So notice how I have multiple layers, right? Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. And normally when we bring stuff into into After Effects, it typically compresses it, or it doesn't compress it, but like you can't defaultly, you don't work with the layers individually, right? They kind of unofficially compress the PSD into one single layer when we work with it. But actually, you can bring in a Photoshop document which has multiple layers and bring it in as what we would call a composition. So when you bring it in as a composition, each of your layers in Photoshop will, in the PSD, will come through as its own layer in Adobe After Effects. Okay, so let's see how you would do that. I'm going to go to exercise 14. And let's open this up. So I'm going to go to File, Import, just like we've done for homework and other places. And let's bring in, we're going to go find the file, photoshop.psd, or Photoshop document.psd. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring this in as composition as opposed to footage. Footage means like video or like a single image. Composition, like it sounds like, is a composition, meaning it can have layers and things like that. So I'm going to bring this in. It's asking, this is also double checking. Do you want to bring this in as composition? Make sure it's set to composition. We want that. It's asking, this has to do with layer styles, which I don't want to talk about really right now. If you know what layer styles are in Photoshop, you can decide if you want them editable or not. I would say for now, sure, if you know what those are. If you don't know what those are, just do the merge. This is not a Photoshop class, but if you took a basic Photoshop class, I'm sure they would talk about what layer styles are. And when I bring this in, notice how I have this composition. It has the little composition icon, just like the other compositions we built. If I double click it, notice how it opens this up, and then I get actually the three separate layers, hat, dog, and background, which match exactly to what we had in Photoshop or Photo P. It brings them in basically as individual layers in your project composition. And then, you can animate it the way you would animate anything. So I'm going to animate this dog moving left to right because why not? Maybe I'll take advantage of parenting. So let's parent the hat to the dog. So whatever the dog does, that is what the hat will move along with it. But then I'm going to have the hat spin in kind of a comedic kind of way. So let's have it like do a spin. Oops. Looks like I got to change the pivot point. Oh, there it is. There's the pivot point. I want it about there. So let's use the pan behind and kind of put it right there. So now there you go. Okay. So taking a Photoshop document, using its layers independently, so you can kind of, so if you know a lot about Photoshop, you might want to, or Photo P, you like building stuff in it, you might want to build it in Photoshop and then bring it over to After Effects, and then it kind of will get converted into layers for you, and you can animate the layers independently. If you brought this through as just a standardized footage, you wouldn't be able to edit the individual parts of that. Okay? All right, so I want you guys to try that out. That was 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14, please.